Yes. The following program is brought to you in living stereo. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Alrighty. Clint, we were talking about you. We were talking about, or I was talking about you. I remember what you said about the Longhorns. Uh, they still haven't figured out how to play all four quarters. I was thinking about that last night around the fourth quarter. So, Exhibit A. Anyway, gee whiz. Well, Frank, do you feel comfortable praying us in? Thank you, Frank. Well, welcome everybody, and we're continuing our journey through the book of through. I'm sorry, I'm so used to saying the book of Acts. We're past that now. We're continuing our journey through the Gospel of Luke, the account written by Dr. Luke. We are now in chapter 7, and we have come through. Last week we looked. Last couple of weeks we were looking at chapter 6. The Jesus is what's called Jesus' Sermon on the Plain. Basically, it's the Kingdom of God 101. If you want to know what uh, living in God's kingdom, doing the will of God looks like, it's right there in chapter 6. Kind of the beginner's unit. Anyway, Luke picks up from there as we get into chapter 7. And he writes, when Jesus had finished saying all this to the people who were listening, he entered Capernaum. Remember, what we're seeing here and what Luke is describing is what's called Jesus' Galilean ministry. And that, of course, that has to do with the region. It's what we would think of as the extreme northern part of Israel, the old nation of the kingdom of Israel, and it's the area surrounding the Sea of Galilee. So he goes back into Capernaum, and there a centurion's servant, whom his master valued highly, was sick and about to die. What's a centurion? Well, We know he is kind of middle management in the Roman army. Yes, that Roman army, the Roman army that is a form of the Roman government, hated and despised by just about every Jew. But this guy is an exception. What is the centurion? Well, he is in charge essentially of 100 soldiers. So he's more than just your rank and file soldier. He's not necessarily in top management, but he is that's a pretty important position. And you would think, hey, centurion, hey, we better watch out for this guy. He could be up to no good. But as we're about to find out, this is a centurion with a different reputation in the region. Anyway, he has this servant, valued highly, sick and about to die. Um, Another thing in mind, just because you're a servant, we tend to think of servanthood and so forth, and we probably have missed or we forget about what being a servant or a slave was back in the day. This was probably someone who was not necessarily a voluntary servant. This was somebody who was probably in some degree of indenture or a slave. If that was the case, this guy had really no rights at all. In fact, there were probably animals and livestock that had more rights than slaves did back in the day. Um, you have a servant about to die in a lot of households. Um, there would be no law against the slave owner killing him. Hey, why should I carry this guy? Why should I feed him for another day? Let alone worry about his health for another day if he's about to die. Get rid of him, do something. This is, as we can see, this is not the attitude of the centurion. This is someone who was highly valued. Yeah, maybe he was a slave. Maybe he definitely was a servant, but he was more than a servant. He was a member of the family. He was a trusted individual. He was a friend. This centurion cared about him. The Luke continues, the centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of the Jews to him. Even more remarkable, you had to have Jewish people representing someone from the hated Roman government. Anyway, they asked Jesus, more than asked, they were, if you look at the original Greek language, they were pleading with Jesus to come and heal his servant. When they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him. This man deserves to have you do this because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue. This is how much of a good guy the centurion was as far as the Jewish residents were concerned. He not only cared about the people in his household, he more than cared about this servant. He was also friends, or at least on a friendly basis, with the Jewish residency. So much so that when the local Jewish population wanted to build a synagogue, basically a meeting building, he said, "Hey, whatever you need, I'll pay for, or I will at least help pay for." And so he did. Interestingly enough, the ruins of the synagogue exist today. You can go out and see where this synagogue was originally built. So the Jewish officials in Capernaum are pleading with Jesus, "Come help our friend. He's been good to us. We want to do everything we can for him." So Jesus went with them. A very unusual thing for someone who is considered to be a rabbi, a leader in the Jewish religion, to do, because, hey, uh, you do not associate with non-Jews. We know who non-Jews are. They are Gentiles. They are anyone who is non-Jewish in the Jewish religious way of thinking. Call them a Gentile, but basically they were the dirty dogs of society. You didn't want to have anything to do with them. And so this is novel. This is shocking that Jesus would not only agree to help, but to go with them, go travel, and go with the intent, if need be, of entering this centurion's home. And then there are additional problems there, because if you have someone who's sick or even dead, hey, a righteous Jew does not go anywhere. First of all, you don't enter the household of a Gentile, of a non-Jew. Secondly, you don't touch someone who is sick or maybe who has died. Not a concern to Jesus. His, uh, Someone has asked for his help. Jesus is going to help him. And so he travels to the house. He was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to say to him, Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. What's the phrase that a lot of folks like to do jokingly when they're trying to impress their friends or say how great a certain person is? We're not worthy. We're not worthy. This is what this guy is saying, but in all sincerity. I don't care how important I may be in this society that we're in. I am not worthy to have you step into my house. That is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. What I wanted from you, what I want from you, what I need from you is sincere, but I could not even consider myself worthy to come to you in person because of who you are and who I regard you as being. That's why I didn't even consider myself worthy to make the request personally. But say the word. All you have to do, I know who you are. I know what you can do. Say the word, and my servant will be healed. That is an astounding statement of faith. And he goes on to explain, verse 8, for I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. So, Lord, I know you don't have to be physically here. You don't even have to touch my servant to heal him. I know you can do it from wherever you are. Just say the word. When Jesus heard this, verse 9, he was amazed. It's rare for Jesus to be documented in the Bible as being amazed. But have you thought about that? Do you think have you ever considered whether you or I might amaze Jesus? Apparently it can be done. In fact, Jesus was amazed at least twice in his ministry. We're seeing one incident here. We probably have seen the other one earlier. Remember what the other instance where Jesus was amazed? When he was back in his hometown, and he, his hometown folks rejected him for who he was, and because of their lack of faith, he was unable to do a lot of miracles in terms of healing people. And according to the Gospels, Jesus was amazed at their lack of faith. Even standing there with him, watching him heal people, there was still a high resistance in terms of acknowledging who he was. Jesus is amazed. Jesus was amazed this time. He's amazed now. Why? Turning to the crowd following him, he said, I tell you, I have not found such great faith even in Israel, even among my fellow Jews, even the folks that are the primary, have the right to be the primary recipients of receiving the blessings of who I am and what I bring to them. Very interesting that he refers to his fellow Jews as Israel. Where was Israel in 1st century AD? Well, on the map, according to the Roman government, Israel did not exist. It was no longer a country. Hadn't been for what, hundreds of years? Now, granted, there were 4, maybe 5 regions that what had used to be the kingdom of Israel had been broken into. Galilee was one of them. But Israel, in terms of being its own country, let alone a self-governing nation, didn't exist as far as the map makers, as far as the Roman government was concerned. But in the eyes of God, Israel still existed. I tell you, I have not found such great faith even in Israel. And with that, verse 10, the men who had been sent returned to the house. They found the servant well. And I'm sure that was more than just, hey, I'm feeling better. He's probably out of his deathbed. He's probably running around doing what good servants needed to be doing. He was back in business. Not just that, there's that miraculous event. And then Luke moves on, verse 11. Soon afterward, Jesus went to a town called Nain. Now, where is Nain? Well, Jesus has been moving around because Nain is not anywhere near Capernaum. Still in Galilee, but it's on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. In fact, it's near the border between Galilee and Samaria. And we call it Nain because that's what it looks like. You know, rhymes with train and rain and plane. And I think they wrote a song with those words, but we won't worry about that. Nain, actually, if you want to be technical about it, if you want to pronounce it the way that it's supposed to be pronounced, it's more like Nain. Your call, your choice. We'll just call it Nain. Anyway, Jesus entered this town, and his disciples and a large crowd went along with him. As he approached the town gate, a dead person was being carried out. He was being carried out for burial. The only son of his mother, and she was a widow. Man, this was a double whammy on this poor woman. Because back in the day, the kind of social net that we are used to, we're accustomed to today, really didn't exist. There was a social net, but it was built around the family. You know, if your husband died, well, you know, you had your family, you had your sons to care for you. But not only your husband, but your son and your only son dies. This woman, in all likelihood, is destitute, barring some other family member or a friend or someone who's willing to take her in. She could very well starve to death. That's the way things were. Not bad enough that she's lost the two most important members of her family, the two most important members of her life. But she doesn't know, she probably doesn't even know where her next meal is coming from. So, sad day for more than one reason for this poor woman, for this family. They're having the funeral service. In fact, they're carrying out the son to be buried. And a large crowd from the town was with her. They were probably saying, well, sorry for your loss, gee. And they were probably mourning sincerely and appropriately, but probably no idea what was going to become of this poor woman. Verse 13, when the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said, don't cry. Very unusual thing to say at a funeral or a funeral procession. What can you do but cry when you're looking at the dead body of your family member? You've lost him. He's not coming back. Well, Jesus says that for a reason. In a couple of moments, she's not going to have any cause for crying because, verse 14, Jesus went up and touched the coffin. They were carrying him on. Very likely an open face coffin, so you can see the body. Again, this is a very unusual thing for a Jewish religious official to do. Because one thing that is complete no-no in Jewish religious teaching is that you do not touch something that's unclean. That includes dead bodies. And if you had to do it, then you have to purify yourself and, all this other stuff. Again, Jesus does not let that bother him. He not only goes to the widow and the bereaved mother, he goes to the coffin, touches the coffin, When he does that, the pallbearer stood still. And he said, "Young man, I say to you, get up." What an unusual thing to say. And you know what happens? Verse 15, the dead man sat up and began to talk. They probably couldn't make very much sense of him initially because he had the burial cloths on him, including the face covering. At some point, I'm sure they started removing those things because they were no longer needed. Anyway, he is back in business. He is back fully alive, and Jesus gave him back to his mother. Amazing thing to see. Verse 16, the crowd was all filled with awe, and they praised God. A great prophet has appeared among us, they said. God has come to help his people. This was fantastic news. And it was so fantastic that this news about Jesus spread throughout Judea and the surrounding country. It's interesting that Luke mentions Judea because, as we pointed out, this little village is nowhere near Judea. There's at least one other province between this little town and Judea. But that gives you an idea. And what's even more remarkable is this is, given communications, mass communications in the first century, this news spread like wildfire throughout Judea, the surrounding country. It went nationwide as far as all things Israel were concerned. It made the equivalent of the evening news. It works all the way down to Judea. Is that of significance? Yeah, because that's probably where the subject of our next story is located. And we're talking about John the Baptist. Verse 18, John's disciples told John about all these things. Calling two of his disciples, he sent them to the Lord to ask, "Are you the one who is to come? Or should we expect someone else?" What a remarkable question. Hey, John B., why are you asking that question? Well, Luke doesn't say for sure, but the chances are very good that this conversation between John the Baptist and his disciples is being carried on while John is in prison. And we remember why John is in prison to begin with. He winds up calling out King Herod for his immoral lifestyle. And the new wife of Herod doesn't like it. And thanks to her protestations, Herod winds up putting John in prison. Maybe something of a shock to John to be there. Maybe something of a shock for John, like many other righteous Jews who are thinking about the coming Messiah and who he could be and what he was supposed to do. Jason mentioned in a sermon last Sunday that he touched briefly on the origins of Superman. Who created Superman? Well, two artists who happen to be Messianic Jews. Where would they get that kind of idea, inspiration about a guy who can bend steel, he can leap tall buildings at a bound, he's faster than a moving locomotive, because that's what they had been expected to believe about the coming Messiah. You look at, for example, a verse in Zechariah talks about when one day the Messiah would stand on top of the Mount of Olives east of Jerusalem. When he did that, the mountain would split in half. That's how powerful he would be. Maybe that's what John was expecting Jesus to do these powerful things. And yet, not seeing any of that action. The other thing about may have been going through John's mind is, hey, I was the prophet announcing Jesus. I was that modern day Elijah who was prophesying, who was pointing to the Son of God coming. And look at where I am now. I'm in prison. I have no idea what's about to happen. And whatever is going to happen, it's probably not going to be real good. So yeah, he appoints two of his disciples. John still has disciples. He appoints two of them and said, go to Jesus. Ask him what's going on. Are you the one? Are you the Son of God? Are you the Messiah that we have, all of us have been told about for hundreds of years? Are you that Messiah? Or is it somebody else? Was I mistaken when I was preaching about you and pointing to you and telling people to follow you? Did I goof up here? So the disciples do what they need to do, what they've been asked to do. Verse 20, the men came to Jesus. They said, John the Baptist sent us to you to ask, are you the one who is to come? Or should we expect someone else? And Luke makes a note here, verse 21. At that very time, in fact, your translation may even read, at that very hour, Jesus cured many who had diseases, sicknesses, and evil spirits, and gave sight to many who were blind. It's not too much of a stretch of imagination to think that while Jesus is doing all these miracles and healing, someone taps his shoulder and turns around. Here are these two disciples from John the Baptist. And they ask this question, are you really who we've been saying you are? Or did we make a big mistake? So, verse 22, yeah, he has an answer. He replied to the messengers, go back and report to John what you have seen and heard. There's no secondhand information here. This is more than just someone, some group of folks taking these disciples aside and saying, man, you should have seen Jesus in action today. Basically, they're seeing it firsthand. They're seeing what Jesus is doing. And he says, go back and report what I've been doing, what you've seen as well as what you've heard. And here he says, the blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Is that the job of the Messiah? Well, yeah. You can go back to several passages in the book of Isaiah. And all the things that Jesus had mentioned, you can lay it back to a specific verse in Isaiah chapter 29, Isaiah chapter 35, Isaiah chapter 61. Maybe the one thing that you can't really identify, choose a verse to identify in Isaiah, might be the one about the lepers being cleansed. But hey, that can be covered by any number of verses in Isaiah. So Jesus rattles off all these things he's been doing that the Messiah would be doing. And as the Messiah, he is doing. And he ends with this, blessed is the man who does not stumble on account of me. Blessed is he who does not stumble. Blessed is he who does not, your translation may read, fall away. Or your translation may read, blessed is he who is not offended because of me. The original Greek word that's translated stumble, fall away, offended, the original Greek translates to scandalized. Scandalized. That's an interesting word. Definition is to be shocked. If you're scandalized, you've been shocked or horrified by behavior that is considered inappropriate, improper, if not immoral. This day and age, it's kind of hard for us to be scandalized by anything. There, there was a day where just just a rumor of something going on could destroy an aspiring politician's career plans, or the career plans of any aspiring person. If certain information gets out, man, that'll sink your boat. That was back in the day, not so much today. These days it's almost like you got to have that bad rep if you want to have any kind of street cred. Yeah. it's I mean, the bar has been set high in today's age in terms of being scandalized about something. But Jesus is using that word. Hey, pay attention to what I'm doing. Look at what I'm doing right now. And if you're not scandalized by it, if you are not offended, if you're not put off, if what I'm doing does not match your expectations and you still want to follow me, you are blessed indeed. Furthermore, it's you have to think about where John the Baptist is right now. If indeed all this takes place when he is in prison, and his life has been turned upside down. I don't know. I mean, if I were John the Baptist, I would be thinking, "Hey, I'm sitting pretty good here." I pegged it. I pointed out the Son of God. I pointed out the new Messiah. People will be coming to me and asking about what it's like to not only know the Messiah, but the Son of God, but to actually be his cousin. Yada yada yada. You know, he may have thought, hey, I'll fade out of the picture as Jesus becomes stronger, becomes the center stage, but I'll be in a nice position here. I'll be, at least in terms of the culture and the day and age, I'll be in a sweet spot. Being in a Roman prison was not a sweet spot by any stretch of the imagination. You can imagine where all sorts of doubts are going through John's mind right now. Lord, have I messed up somewhere? Has something gone totally wrong? And if so, why? I need some guidance here. Maybe we go through that every now and then. Probably if you go through, if you live long enough, you'll have those situations where you feel like something's gone wrong and I don't know why. And maybe that's the time where Jesus comes to you and says, "Hey, if you can hang in there, regardless of what's going on in your life, if you can go through that, if you can trust me with it, if you can still call me Lord and Savior, you are very blessed indeed." I think we're going to call a halt to there right now because we want to go. Jesus has more to say. I mean, this is not the end of the story, but there there is more to discuss, and so maybe we're better off picking up there for our lesson next Sunday. So, if you will, read the rest of chapter 7. That'll be the basis of our lesson. And I want to thank you for your time and attention. I hope you got something out of our discussion today. Thanks so much for being here. Have a great week. We're getting ready for Thanksgiving. I know the weather doesn't feel like it's fall, but what can I say? Anyway, it's Texas. We've had many warm Thanksgivings before. This may be, who knows? This might be one of them. Have a great week, and Lord willing, we'll see y'all next Sunday. Yes, ma'am.